All right, so Invincible just finished, and much as there's a lot of praise for the show for its amazingness and how unique it is as a TV series, there are several issues that people have had with it. Some of it, and the two main ones that stood out to me, had to deal with the animation or the violence. So today we're going to talk about whether we felt like that was a serious issue and how they can maybe improve on that in the future. So let's start with the hot one, which is the violence. Did we feel that Invincible was too violent in the sense of like kind of unnecessarily like blood gore at certain points, or we feel like it was rightly justified? So let's start with OC. What do you feel about the violence?
Usually whenever people bring up the issue of too much violence, I think it's easy to conflate violence that's gratuitous with violence that's necessary. So like gratuitous violence is like unnecessary violence. It doesn't have any purpose. It doesn't further the story or the message of the movie anymore. In fact, it might even take away from the purpose or the message of the movie or the show. Whereas with intentional violence, it can add a deeper layer to the piece of entertainment that you're watching. And so for Invincible, I feel like most of the violence in this show was necessary because the way that they used the violence to basically show the true danger of what it would be like to live in a world with super beings. And it also highlights, as we have now seen, like fully realized in this finale of season 1, it highlights the philosophy of Omni-man and the Viltrumites and how they look at human beings as like they're just pests, they're just animals, and there's no value to their lives. And so like the rampant violence meaning nothing to Omni-man, but then his son is watching all of this and he's like breaking down and he's wanting to do everything he can to protect them, but he has no power to do so. I think it highlights both of these opposing worldviews, and it makes the show better because of that, in my opinion.
What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I feel like the violence in this show makes a whole lot of sense because, like, okay, for Mark, one of the reasons at the end he's like freaking out is because he's seeing all these people die right in front of him.
Yeah.
And for us as the viewers to sort of feel that, we sort of also need to see that in terms of it manifesting as being too violent or like really violent. But it's more visceral, like it to just see like everyone splattering and dying that way.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to, but if I wouldn't know what's more realistic just because I've never seen a human being like get destroyed by super beings, but or even just like extremely high impact things. I've never seen that. So I don't know if it's realistic, but I would assume that seeing a lot of blood is what you would see. So just because we're meat sacks filled with blood and water, but yeah, it's believable to me for sure, and I think it enhances the show rather than take away from it. Like for the people, what are they saying that is too violent? Like,
I mean, I guess,
do they give examples?
I guess what they mean in terms of like I guess, for example, my brother, he kind of made this as a small criticism where it's like, and going back to like the blood, right? Like, and this kind of goes back to the next criticism of the animation where it's like, it seems like they have like they go really detailed with the blood. Like they really like want to show that gore and all that stuff. And like they it's almost like they put more focus on the blood and gore than they ever do with the animation kind of thing. So gotcha. I guess
okay, so it's tied to the other question.
It kind of is a little tied with it, but to finish the point of the being too violent with the blood and all that type of stuff, yeah, I agree with OC. I definitely think the nature of the show, it works with the nature of the show because the show is also a drama comedy. So there's sort of that kind of humor factor to the blood, and it works too, because even moments, although it's screwed up, like moments where they had the that one douchebag who was like in that one episode with that one douchebag at the school that's supposed to be like UCLA, and then he turns into a robot type of thing. Like that moment in some ways, I mean, it's a screwed up moment with the blood and violence, but at the same time, it's also somewhat humorous where it's like, okay, this douchebag gets his just deserved type of thing, right? So I think, yeah, it definitely goes with the nature of the show. But going to the next criticism with the animation, it does sometimes feel like, you know, they're going to put so much detail in making the blood this good, but they're going to have stiff animation every now and then. It's like, geez, man, maybe you could have put more focus there. But what do you guys feel about the animation? Because that was sort of a criticism to some degree. Where there's moments
as someone who edits a lot, and also like edits in like After Effects and does some graphic animation, it's so noticeable. Like when they're lazy about it, it's super noticeable. And to me, I was like, okay, it's fine. Like the voice acting is great. The art is great. It's just occasionally you'll get like a dead bird that is clearly keyframed in a way that does just pure rotation and scale and then drops down in position, and that's it. Like they don't give it any more like warping to make it realistic. It's just it's really stiff, and it's super noticeable for me.
Yeah. What about you, OC?
The thing about this show, they definitely put a lot of money behind the voice acting. And I don't know if they necessarily cared about putting as much money behind the animation, because like we kind of talked and discussed as we were watching the show about how many voice actors, like noticeable voice actors, not even voice actors, just actors that were voicing different characters in this show. And I was like, even watching the finale, I'm like, this is Seth Rogen. And like just all of these random people who we recognize their voice, but do we really need them? As opposed to like if you took half of the money and instead just got regular voice actors for half of the characters and then put that into the animation, would that have been a better quality animation or better quality show overall? Because most of the time voice actors don't, you know, they go under the radar. They do their job and their job is done well. But I don't know how much more it adds to the show to have that character be played by Seth Rogen versus be played by some just normal voice actor.
Yeah, like Tom Kenny. I'm pretty sure Tom Kenny could have done the
Tom
voice.
Kenny could have done 4 of the voices, like realistically speaking.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that their focus might have been off with that in that aspect, and so I'm not sure how. I mean, now this is a proven concept. It's no longer like experimental, or I'm sure before the season 1 started, it's fairly experimental. So maybe they'll have more money to put into the animation, and they won't decide to bring in more A-list actors to voice new characters and stuff like that. Like, we don't need Johnny Depp voicing the villain in season 2. Yeah.
Hey, who knows? Maybe we can get Will Smith in the next season. I'd love to see that. But as far as the animation goes, I mean, it's tough for me because it's like, generally speaking, as long as the story is competent, you kind of don't care. But I think for what makes it more noticeable is that since it's a superhero show and you're seeing like action, it sometimes takes away from the action. Like there's some action sequences where I thought it would be a lot more cooler if the animation was a lot more fluid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I guess the blood kind of compensates for it, because when you see all the blood and gore, you feel more of that, you feel that effect towards you, as opposed to when there's no blood and gore and you're seeing that animation. Yeah. But
it's weird because it's like, you know, they can like do great stuff because some of the action scenes are great.
Yeah.
You know? And then when they drop the ball with the animation, they really drop it. So it's like it's weird to see that, because when it's a studio that clearly knows what they're doing, it's because they took shortcuts, you know. They make it obvious that they did.
Yeah. I'm curious whether or not they felt like they were in a rush to get the series out to make it like that, because it just...
I mean, probably. I mean, if that's, I don't know, like you noticed it a lot too, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think my biggest... Like, in the beginning, I was kind of trying to ignore it. I'm like, okay, well, funny enough, I think Crystal, before the show came out, Crystal called out saying, yeah, the animation looks weird. And I was looking at Crystal like, don't hate. But then I started watching the show. And I think the biggest one that noticeable for me was there's one moment where there's Omni-man, and he's talking to one of those people who are like secretly watching over him. and it's like he was like moving stiff, and I'm like, why is he so stiff? And then I see he's flying, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But he literally looked like just a cardboard, him like moving, and it was just like he was floating, and it just looked like it was just a stiff cardboard moving in and out, like something. It literally looked like one of our carbon copies, basically, just moving it, you know. So
yeah, PNG position to the left or right.
Exactly. Felt like a PNG, and I was just like, geez, man, this looks kind of awkward. And even the recent fight, like there were some moments where it just looked like, it just looked like stiff cardboards, and it was just like, on one hand, the blood made me like be like, oh, this is sad, and like Omni-man's killing his son, that's even more sad. Spoilers, I guess we've been spoiling it most of the time. But on the other hand, it's just like, this just would, again, I guess we're spoiled watching a lot of anime, even Young Justice. So it's like to see that more smoother, and then you see this, that's even a superhero show, and it's not as smooth. It's just, it comes off a little bit disconnected. So I'm definitely, hopefully, next season, there's no reason for them not to have better animation. So